we always knew we were going to make compost. There's all these other things that we want to do as part of our overarching company, Chartman Bang. But compost was the first thing. We always knew we were going to value add. And as part of what we did, part of what I'd learned, part of looking at the situations in agriculture, what were the things that needed to change and what were the most effective ways of doing it, compost was just right up there. But solid compost is really difficult sell for agriculture, for broadacre agriculture. The amount you need per hectare and the purchase price, particularly where it's a high enough quality, is a scary number. Like, it might pay off, but it's more than most types of farms can generate to make that investment without taking a huge risk. And then it's only produced in a few locations, which are normally hundreds of kilometers from any given farm. It's bulky, you need a lot of volume per hectare, so you pay a lot in trucking costs on top of the purchase price. Then you've got to have a special sort of spreader. You've got to have 2 tractors or one with a loader that you take on and off to fill it and out and out. It's another job, and it just ends up, even when you do a trial and you go, oh, this is amazing, it's not practical or financially viable in a lot of cases. And so I was looking at that going, okay, so I found compost, which is an amazing thing to help all these things that drive me. But it's not practical or economically viable. What are the fundamentals? It seems that the soluble organic molecules, carbon molecules and other things that come out of compost when you spread on the surface and it rains, that is the key fundamental driver of what compost does in agriculture. It's different when you work it in, it's different things there, and when you use really high rates, but what is the fundamental for broadacre agriculture? It was soluble carbon, soluble organic molecules. So it can take 4 years to get the full benefit out of a surface application of compost. And we went, why does it take that long? And the answer is that compost has 2 fundamental properties. One, it'll hold 3 times its weight in water if it's highly mature, the sort of compost that we make. And when it goes dry, it rejects water, becomes hydrophobic. So if you've got compost sitting on the surface of the soil and it starts raining, so it's got to rain long enough that this particle of compost has overcome its water repellency, which takes time. So you might need a 2-hour long rainfall event, or some rain and then more rain 2 hours later, and it hasn't dried out in between. Then once you've had enough rain, enough moisture to get it to start to accept water, then you have to have 3 times its weight in water getting into it, which is a lot of water. And then it starts to run through. So you've had to have this long rainfall event to open it up. You've had to have enough continuous rain, slow enough that it's being absorbed before you get anything out of it. So that's really inefficient. That's why it can take so long, because the events where all those conditions come together to push some of the soluble carbon into the soil are, particularly in inland Australia, relatively uncommon. And so what's the fundamental thing there? It's, you've got some compost, you run water through it and get the soluble stuff out. Maybe we can make that way more efficient. So we got to this point by ourselves, thinking through things from fundamental level. And then we went, oh, that's a compost extract. That idea already exists, but it wasn't being done commercially. That's different from compost tea. Compost tea extracts what's soluble, adds some nutrients like fish emulsion, adds some molasses for energy, and you're trying to breed up a heap of bacteria and fungi to go spread them on the paddock. We weren't doing that. We were trying to provide the carbon/organic molecules. So we didn't need to do that other stage. We just needed to get it through there as efficiently as possible. And by experimenting from starting by hand, we got to the point where, like, I had my hands in wet compost, doing things to try and get everything out of it. we learned the maximum amount that you can dissolve into water before you have to start to force it. And we learned what is the right pattern to get all of that out. These are some of the things that we did invent, and it's one of the few things we don't tell people. We'll tell you everything else about how to make the process, but not those specifics. And that ended up making 1 kilogram of compost is now 1,000 times more efficient per hectare. And so we're forgetting the soil health effects that we were looking for. We've gone from 3 to 5 tons of compost down to 30 litres of extract, which only contains a few hundred grams of compost. We get 90% of our compost ends up in that. We only get about 10% of the solids left over, and most of that's clay from the soft surface we operate on. That now bridged the gap between, okay, we've got soils with certain problems that cause challenges for food production. Compost is this amazing tool between it, but it's not practical or economic for large scale farming. Now we've addressed the reasons, so we addressed the reasons that lead to you wanting compost. To address those reasons, we made the next leap of what makes this hard, what can we fix there? And now we've got an option that can be 100 times less expensive per hectare. You can put it through any boom spray, any nozzle, any irrigation system, any plane, any sort of application system we've come across so far. We can put it through that. So there's no limitations there. It's at least 100 times cheaper per hectare and works better and faster. So we didn't create carbon rich in order to create carbon boost, but we did create carbon rich in order to be able to create solutions like that. Carbon boost, liquid compost extract, is an outcome of our way of approaching problems, and there will be others to follow that. We're working on a nitrogen product and a phosphorus product, and will be various other things as well, as we have time and money to do so. But the reason we created Carbon Rich was to be able to follow that way of thinking, and Carbon Boost is one of the outcomes of that.